Okay, today we're going to start with where would you sleep? Sometimes you would sleep in the wagon, sometimes under it, sometimes in a tent, and sometimes out in the open under the stars. There wasn't enough room in the wagon to bring a mattress for everyone in the family. So, if there was one mattress, usually your mother and father would sleep on it. They might leave the mattress in the wagon if there was enough room, or they might put it in a tent and sleep there. Babies and little children usually slept in the wagon. If it was raining, it wasn't easy to keep completely dry. The best place was inside the wagon. The next best place was in a tent. You would probably get a little wet if you put your blankets under the wagon and went to sleep there. If it looked like it might rain when your parents set up the tent, they would dig a ditch around the tent so that the water would run off into the ditch and not under the tent. If you were going to sleep under the wagon when it was raining, your mother and father would wrap your blankets in an oilskin, which is a piece of cloth that has been rubbed with oil and is waterproof. In good weather, the nicest place to sleep was out in the open under the starry skies. If you lay on your back and looked up at the faraway stars, you could pick one, call it Oregon, and try to think how long it would take for you to get there. Oregon would seem almost as far as that star. What kinds of clothes did people wear? Everyone wore simple clothes. You would get too dirty and dusty traveling all day to wear fancy clothes. Clothes had to be made of strong material because they had to last for many months. There were no stores along the way where you could buy new clothes. Very often women would carry along rolls of cloth in their wagons. Then they could make new shirts or dresses when the old ones were torn or too worn to wear anymore. Boys wore shirts and pants made of cotton or buckskin, which is leather made from the skin of a deer. It is soft and strong and yellow or gray in color. Girls wore skirts or dresses, usually made of brightly colored cotton called calico or gingham. It had stripes or checks or flowers in different colors. You spent so much of the time walking alongside the wagons that it was very important for everyone to wear sturdy, strong shoes. But the trip was so long that they often wore out. Then you would hope that someone in the wagon train was a shoemaker. If not, your mother and father would help fix the worn-out shoes. Another important thing to have was a hat or a bonnet. Remember that in those days there were no sunglasses and the sun was very bright and hot. So boys would wear hats with wide brims and girls would wear bonnets that helped protect their eyes. What would you eat? For the first part of the trip, you would eat mostly what you brought in the wagon. Biscuits, potatoes, bacon, dried meat, crackers, dried fruit, cornmeal, beans, and eggs. Then just when there was no hard biscuits left, you would start eating fried bread. There were no real ovens to bake bread in, so your mother would mix dough and then fry it in the pan. At first, it was nice to have something new, but then it got very boring to eat the same thing over and over again. You would be glad to travel into new territory where there were wild onions and berries of all kinds, and where you might catch catfish in the rivers and trout in the mountain streams. If you were carrying eggs in a bumpy wagon traveling across rivers and up and down hills and over mountains, how would you keep them from breaking? Some of the pioneers put the eggs in the flour barrel, making sure the eggs didn't touch each other. The only problem with this was that your hands would get all white whenever you reached in to dig out an egg. Pretty smart, though. Everybody wanted butter because it made the dry biscuits and fried bread taste better. The pioneers would get milk for making butter from the cows they brought. But after traveling all day, making dinner, rounding up the cattle, fixing broken things, and doing all the other chores, there wasn't much time left to make butter. But the women discovered an easy way to make it. They would hang a milk can from the wagon hoops or tie it to the side of the wagon. As the wagon bumped along the trail, the milk bounced around so much that in a few hours, when you opened the can, there was a ball of butter at least an inch thick, and lots of smaller pieces. The butter had made itself. After traveling for many weeks, the wagon trains moved into buffalo country, and that meant new and delicious food. How did you make the buffalo meat last a long time? The buffalo is a very big animal with lots of meat on it. There was too much meat to eat all at once. And so the pioneers learned from the Indians how to dry the meat and keep it for a long time. The way to dry it was called jerking. First, the meat was cut into strips about 1 inch thick. Then the strips were heated over a very low fire for several hours. Another way to dry the meat was to put it out in the sun. It would take about 2 days to dry. Usually the pioneers could not stop and wait 2 days while the meat dried, so they would tie strings onto the outside of the wagon from the front to the back and hang the strips of meat over the strings. It looked like fringes hanging down. The meat would dry while you kept on traveling west. Oh, this is the best part, you guys. How would you build a fire if you didn't have any wood? Out on the plains, you would sometimes travel for days without seeing any trees or wood that you could use to build a fire. And so the pioneers had to find something else that would burn easily. They discovered that dried buffalo droppings, that's poop, you guys, called buffalo chips, made a hot, clean fire with a little smoke and no smell. Usually the children would take baskets and collect the buffalo chips before dinner. It could take 3 full baskets to cook a meal. It often got very windy on the plains, so the safest way to make the fire was to dig a trench 10 inches deep, 6 inches wide, and about 2 feet long. Then you would put the chips down in the trench and light them with the matches or by setting off gunpowder. When the wagon trains reached the Rocky Mountains, there were no more buffalo chips, and it was still sometimes hard to find wood. So the pioneers burned dead sagebrush branches, and even the sage roots. Children would gather the dead sage the night before so that you could have a fire for cooking breakfast. Burning poop. What do you guys think about that?